This is a Vote 2025 special on Mountain Lake PBS, New York's 115th Assembly District debate.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's debate with the two candidates running in the special election this November 4th for the 115th district seat in the New York State Assembly. I am Thom Hallock from Mountain Lake PBS, and I will be your moderator tonight. We're going to have the candidates, Michael Cashman and Brent Davison, introduce themselves in just a moment. We invited you, our viewers, to send in questions to ask the candidates, and we will try to get to as many of those as we can during this hour. The candidates will also be questioned by our panel of journalists. Pat Bradley is the North Country Bureau Chief for WAMC, Northeast Public Radio. Kara Chapman is the Champlain Valley reporter for North Country Public Radio. And Alec Lasham is the Plattsburgh Bureau Chief for WCAX Television. We'll go over the ground rules in just a few moments, but first, let's begin by welcoming the candidates. Michael Cashman is the Democratic nominee, and Brent Davison is the Republican nominee. Let's begin by asking both gentlemen to give an opening statement. You each have a minute 30. We did a coin toss to determine the order, and we begin with Mr. Cashman.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you to Mountain Lake, along with all of our panelists, the League of Women Voters. And I also want to thank the viewers for dialing in tonight. Lastly, I want to thank my opponent, Mr. Davison, not only for being an opponent, but for his service to the state and to the country. My name is Michael Cashman, and I am running to be your next Assemblyman of the 115th District. I grew up in a working class family. My mother was a secretary, my stepfather a sheet metal fabricator. My grandparents lived with us, and I'm a first generation college student. It was SUNY Plattsburgh that brought me to the North Country 26 years ago, and I'm very proud of my service to the North Country since that time. This campaign has been about getting to all four corners of the district, making sure that we're having conversations, listening to people, learning from them directly. It's about affordability that works for you. It's about safety, and it's about planning for our future. I'm looking forward to sharing more about my vision during this debate, and at this time, I'll cede the rest of my time.
All right, thank you, Mr. Cashman. Mr. Davison.
Hello, and thank you to everybody who helped put on this debate. Thank you to my opponent, Mr. Cashman. Thank you, Tom, for having me. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Brent Davison. I'm running for the 115th District for the Assembly. I was born and raised here in the North Country. Grew up in Morris Forks, New York. Went to high school up there and then went right into the military. I spent 4 years active duty in the Army, got out and did another 16 years in the Reserve and National Guard. After that time, I went to college locally at Clinton Community College, then continued my service at the New York State Department of Corrections. I worked downstate at Sing Sing, Greenhaven, and Shawangunk correctional facilities. I then transferred over into the New York State Police, where I spent 29 years serving in the state police and ultimately became the Troop B commander, where I was responsible for leading over 400 employees, about 35 which were civilian and the rest were sworn members. I'm a family man. My wife and I have 7 children and 7 grandchildren combined. I'm also a deacon in the Catholic Church. I'm here today because I feel that the North Country needs a strong voice in Albany. I've been a public servant my entire life, and I'd like to continue that service down in Albany to make sure that the North Country is heard. Thank you.
Gentlemen, thank you. We'll begin now with the questions. You'll have 1 minute to respond, and then we'll allow 30 seconds for rebuttals. We'll begin the questions with the questions from our panel, and then we'll get to the questions we receive from our viewers. Here's Pat Bradley with our first question. Pat.
Hello. This campaign has begun with what some people might consider to be some negative advertising. This flyer in particular caught my attention. It's for Republican Brent Davison. I'm sure you recognize it. And it claims that Democrat Michael Cashman will be a yes man to Governor Kathy Hochul. And the flyer is paid for by the Republican State Committee and the Republican Assembly Campaign Committee, which are also some of the largest donors to Mr. Davison's campaign. When Mr. Davison announced his candidacy, Assembly Minority Leader Will Barclay traveled to Plattsburgh with other Republicans from across the state to show their support. Not a bad thing, but an extremely rare occurrence in North Country campaigns. So, Mr. Cashman, if elected, You would be our most junior Democrat, so why wouldn't you be a so-called yes man to Democratic leaders? And Mr. Davison, a slight variation on that question, why should voters believe you will not be a yes man to Assembly Republican leaders, considering their links to your campaign?
Mr. Cashman, we begin with you. You have a minute.
It's very simple. When I made the announcement to run for the Assembly, I was flanked by two individuals that held this seat, both a Republican and a Democrat, that understand what needs to be done down in Albany and what needs to come back here to the district. Either one of us are going to be the most junior member of the Assembly. I'm an independent thinker, and I've worked very hard for the town of Plattsburgh as my time as the town supervisor. We've worked in many ways in a bipartisan fashion with the Clinton County Republican-led legislative body. I also serve as an officer of the New York State Association of Towns, elected as a vice president among my peers, because they understand that you have to put people over politics. That's what I'm prepared to do down in Albany, and that's what I'll do for the district.
Thank you. Mr. Cashman. Mr. Davison.
I think it's convenient to say that we don't want to talk about parties when the Democratic Party has been a one-party rule down in Albany for 6 years. We have the highest taxes in the state. We have one of the highest amounts of out-migration, the highest taxes in the country, and one of the highest amounts of out-migration in the country. There's no reason that I wouldn't think that my opponent would vote right along like his predecessor did the majority of the time with the majority party in Albany. The difference for me is I'm not in the majority party, and I don't answer to anybody above me in Albany. I answer to the voters. I'm taking this job out of service and dedication to the people in the North Country, so that is where I'm looking to go.
Mr. Cashman?
Again, I go back to the fact that both Janet Dupree and Billy Jones endorse me. They know what it takes on both sides. You have to work down in Albany to bring resources back to the district. There is a benefit from having somebody in the majority down there, but again, I'm going to be an independent thinker, and that will be seen as we continue on this debate, because I'm sure we're going to talk about some subjects where my opponent and I actually agree, and that is going to be very different than what many Democrats down in Albany and New York City think.
Yes, I mean, obviously I question that. I question the reality in that. I have served everybody over my career as a servant, regardless of party. I understand what he's saying, that he's going to be neutral, but he's also running under the Family Party, which is a very left-wing party, and a party who's endorsed Zoran Mamdani, very left-wing, and I find it hard to believe that Mr. Cashman's going to be able to have that ability to work across the aisle like he says he is.
Pat, did you have a follow?
Yes, I'd like a follow-up. You've both mentioned that you will be independent thinkers, that you'll work for, the voters and such. But in the yes man question, I'd like you to provide specific issues that you differ with your party, and not, he's going to be, aligned here, he's going to be aligned there. What are some of the specific issues you differ with your party?
Let's begin. Mr. Cashman?
Pat, I can start right off. One of the things that is most concerning in this district right now is the HALT Act. Okay, we differ right there. Also, the chemical substances, and you can Google this, folks. It's well documented. The electrification goals for New York State are problematic. We do not have the grid here in the North Country. I could go on and on and on. Independent mind is what I am about, okay? But I'm also about making sure that we're providing solutions for the district. And my opponent is invoking, an election down in New York City. I have been endorsed by the Working Families Party since I was a town board member. So you can look at my history for housing and caring for seniors and infrastructure. There are no Democratic roads. There are no Republican water lines. I'm about common sense and getting things done for our community. That's what it's about.
Mr. Davison, a minute.
Yes, I mean, I only bring up the New York City thing because of the Working Family Party endorsing very far radical people. Also, our governor endorses them. So this is a party who wants to close prisons. They're for the HALT Act. They're defund the police. So, as a law enforcement representative, my goal is to repeal the HALT Act and the cashless bail. And I question my opponent, if he had a chance today to repeal both of those, if he would do that.
Right now, in this moment.
All right, gentlemen, thank you. Let's move on to our next question from Kara Chapman.
As we record this debate, the federal government shutdown is entering its third week. A big sticking point in negotiations has to do with health care. Specifically, whether to extend Affordable Care Act tax credits that help reduce insurance costs for millions of Americans. They're set to expire in December. If that happens, New York's Department of Health projects there will be big impacts for local families who get their insurance through the state marketplace. For example, a family of 4 in Clinton County that makes $130,000 a year could see their premiums double next year. Also looming are the expected impacts of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act on rural health care. Upcoming Medicaid work-proof requirements could cause people to lose their insurance. And New York officials have said shifting Medicaid costs to the state would result in a loss of billions in funding each year. According to North Country healthcare professionals, all that threatens the region's delicate healthcare system and would result in a loss of services. My question for each of you is, what is the state's role to play in minimizing the number of New Yorkers who lose their insurance and ensuring the affordability of that healthcare coverage?
First of all, I think you're bypassing and overlooking some of the benefits that come with that H.R. 1 bill. There's a lot of things in there. The Medicaid in New York State outcosts Florida and Texas combined. There's all kinds of fraud and stuff in there. I think it needs to be audited. No one's saying that they're going to take away these services. They're just looking to modify them. They're going to modify who's eligible for them. The healthcare crisis up here in the upstate New York area, the North Country, started well before this bill. It started about 7 years ago, when we decided to outsource our medical care to UVM in Vermont. My wife works at the hospital in Plattsburgh, and she can tell you that ever since then, the services that we provide have gone downhill. They get the best doctors, the best nurses, and all the money, and the North Country has lost out on that. We need to give incentives to bring people back to work in the North Country. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cashman, 1 minute.
The issues of the federal government are certainly going to compound on the state. Healthcare should be a human right for New Yorkers. I've been endorsed by NYSA, which is the nurses union, along with 1199 SEIU, our healthcare union, because they know, as well as I know, that we have to fight tooth and nail for rural healthcare. Rural America already doesn't get its fair share. As a legislator in the New York State Assembly, we have to think creatively to make sure that we are providing public-private partnerships, we are protecting our clinics, we're recruiting good doctors into the area, but we have to make sure that Medicaid is protected. We're talking about approximately $8 billion that it's gonna trickle down through the system. That means that there's the potential for hospital closures to occur in our district. So we have to be wide-eyed, we have to punch above our weight, and we need to make sure that we're seeking our fair share.
Mr. Davison, would you like rebuttal?
Yes, obviously I'm 100% for medical coverage for people. I just think we need to do it in a responsible manner so we don't bankrupt the state. I think the state has been relying too heavily on the federal government to pay for that, and I think the fraud and abuse in New York's Medicaid has grown out of control. I believe the Medicaid costs in New York State have gone up like 40% since Governor Hochul took over. So rather than spending money in areas that we don't need it, I feel we need to incentivize doctors and nurses and professionals to come to the area, to stay here and live here and work here. Part of the H.R. 1 is money set aside for rural hospitals.
Thank you, Mr. Cashman.
I would just say that New York State is a donor state to the federal government, and while I certainly think that we should be cutting red tape and not burdening businesses and taxpayers with unnecessary bills, it should be recognized that New York State is a donor state in the larger things.
All right, gentlemen, thank you. Alec Lasham has our next question.
Gentlemen, last month the Department of Corrections said there are still roughly 2,000 National Guard members at state prisons across New York. Without them, the inmate-to-staff ratio would be the highest in more than a decade. This is the result of the mass firings from the Wildcat strikes earlier this year over prison safety, and namely the HALT Act. That's the law that partly did away with solitary confinement. If elected, how would you improve safety for inmates and correction officers, and what realistic pathway do you believe exists to achieve this?
Mr. Cashman, we begin with you.
Sure. Consummate education with my peers, Republicans and Democrats alike. And what the governor did was vindictive and abhorrent. And as a member of the New York State Association of Towns, I got our association to put out a statement calling out the nonsense that the governor said when we couldn't potentially hire some of the COs in local government. So what will I do? I will continue to work with unions. I will continue to work with my colleagues to punch above our weight to make sure that voice is heard. But what we really need to do is to get some of the other assembly members up here into the North Country to see firsthand the conditions that they think they know about, because they do not know what is actually occurring.
Well, I would agree with that. One of the first things that I'll do as an assemblyman is invite some of the lawmakers who came up with the HALT Act to come up and do a tour of Clinton Correctional Facility and see what it's like to work there every day. I worked as a CO for a year and a half. There's a reason why the corrections union and the correction officers are behind me. The law needs to be repealed today. We need to start over from scratch, and we need to involve all the stakeholders. We need to involve the correction officers, the civilians, and inmate advocates. The HALT Act does nothing for anybody in the correctional facility except for the percentage of the worst of the incarcerated individuals. The other inmates that just want to do their time, they're preyed upon by these inmates. The correction officers go to work every day. They don't know if they're going to be physically attacked, exposed to some harmful substance, and it's the same with the civilians. The law needs to be repealed immediately, and we need to start over from there.
I would agree. A 10-point plan was recently put out that was endorsed by NYSCOBA, PEF, and CSEA. I received CSEA's endorsement, actually, and I also endorsed that plan to move forward. But there's going to be a lot more work that needs to be done beyond that 10-point plan.
Mr. Davison?
Yes, I think the 10-point plan is a Band-Aid trying to put over a gaping wound. The correction officers that I've spoken to do not think it's enough. It's also too late. This is something that should have been put out maybe a year ago, and we could have avoided the strike that occurred. The correction officers and the civilians go to work every day not knowing what's going to happen to them, and the worst part of it is, and I believe this, the governor and the commissioner do not back them.
Alec, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah. I do want to ask, what do you say to people that say the HALT Act is in place because it's there to prevent any type of brutality towards inmates? And in preceding the Wildcat strikes this year as well, we had a very high-profile inmate death at Marcy Prison downstate. What would you say to inmate advocate groups who give that argument?
Mr. Cashman, we'll begin with you. Minute.
Anyone that is bad in any profession is going to be bad in any profession. What we're talking about is guardrails that protect the CEOs and the civilians behind the wall. And we can see that it is not working. So we have to repeal this disastrous policy and make sure that we're protecting New York State employees. We need to protect our own employees, from CEOs to civilians. So a recalibration absolutely has to occur because it is a failure.
And Mr. Davison, a minute.
Yes, no one would support what happened to the inmates. Obviously, the correction officers went way overboard and they committed serious crimes. The HALT Act certainly doesn't help the situation out in the facility. Everyone is on edge, everyone's stressed out, and the worst part is there's no repercussions. There's no deterrent to prevent the activity like this from happening. It all starts with someone attacking a CO, attacking a nurse, throwing substances, bodily fluids on somebody, exposing them to some harmful substance, and the correction staff just does not get support from Albany. That has to change.
All right, gentlemen, thank you. On to round two now with Pat Bradley.
We've seen ICE detaining and deporting migrant workers on farms across the country, including in New York State. Agriculture is a key component of the North Country economy. How should New York State support farms and the agriculture industry in the wake of these immigration raids?
Well, obviously, I'm for immigration into this country. That's how the country was founded. I'm for legal immigration. I don't agree with opening the borders wide open and just letting anyone in without vetting them. As far as the migrant farm workers, I'm not aware of many up here that have been deported like that. We need those workers. Obviously, they're out working today, picking apples, they're working on dairy farms. I think the government needs to prioritize and work on the ones that are a threat to public safety. That would be my priority, and that's where I'd start.
It's a failure of our federal government. We've been talking about this for year after year after year after year after year. And it is a problem for both Republicans and Democrats and independents alike. New York State needs to protect people in their community. And I would agree with my opponent that we need to have safe communities. But we also have to make sure that we're protecting our farmers. And we're coming up with common sense visa programs that we can have individuals working, picking apples to working in the farms year round. So I do not support, the federal government coming in such a manner without the recalibration from federal policies, taking people off the farms, often in mistaked identities. But if an individual is here illegally, they should not be here.
All right. Pat, you had a follow-up?
Yes, I did. The green light law, which is a state law that allows any resident of the state to apply for a driver's license regardless of their immigration status. Should it be amended to exempt counties along the Canadian border?
Mr. Davison, we'll start with you on that.
Should the people along the Canadian border be exempted from that?
The counties in New York along the Canadian border.
You should have to go through the same driver's training and be a citizen just like everybody else to have a license. I don't agree with giving illegal immigrants driver's license. And the new thing about giving them commercial driver's license, I find that insane. If you know the process to go through to get a commercial driver's license, it's quite extensive. Obviously, the bigger the vehicle that you're driving, the more dangerous it is on the road. I've been to many fatals over my career, and we even had one up in St. Lawrence County that did involve a vehicle with migrants in it. Ironically, the other person driving was not illegal. He ended up killing a bunch of illegals, but he wasn't licensed. So you have to have properly trained and licensed people, and there should be no exemption for that.
And Mr. Cashman.
Earlier, I was asked examples of, what would be different than with my party. I would not have voted for this law to begin with. It needs to be changed. There are serious consequences because of it. But again, the state and the federal government have to find common sense relationships to move forward for the safety of our home communities.
For the last several months, the Trump administration has been engaged in a trade war with Canada. Tariffs remain in effect on things like Canadian steel and aluminum, and there's also a blanket 35% tariff for goods that are not compliant with the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement. President Trump has justified the tariffs by claiming the northern border is a significant source of migrants and fentanyl entering the country. But according to U.S. Customs and Border Protection data, the number of migrant encounters at the U.S.-Canada border has largely declined, then leveled out since the summer of 2024. And while the amount of fentanyl seized went up in fiscal year 2025, it remains a fraction of what crosses into the country from the southern border. Meanwhile, the tariffs and tensions between the two countries have spurred a decrease in Canadian tourism, impacting businesses and livelihoods across the 115th Assembly District. My questions are the president's trade war and its impacts on the North Country justified? And how have each of you seen the issues of drug trafficking and illegal immigration play out in your current and former roles?
And Mr. Cashman, you begin, 1 minute.
Yeah, so we certainly need to have safe borders. I'm glad that Canada has a fentanyl czar. I believe the amount is about 0.2%, so it's a small amount, but we want to see zero, right? Our trade relationship with Canada is very sad. I have talked with many business owners, from hotels to restaurants to golf courses, that are seeing a serious reduction of 20 or 30% on their ledgers. Much of the economy that we have built here is in relationship to our Canadian visitors. But there's also a social connection as well. This is a nonsensical attack. I would hope to actually continue the Assembly Task Force on Canadian Relations. It's that important to our district, from Lake Placid to Malone to here in Clinton County, and everywhere in between. The Canadian visitor and the business that we do with Canada are critical.
Thank you. Mr. Davison, 1 minute.
As far as the fentanyl coming through the border, I don't know where you're getting your statistics, but we had open borders for 4 years. Maybe it slowed down in August of last year, but if you look at the number of overdoses that are occurring in the North Country, it's staggering. The only reason they're not quadrupled is because everybody has access to Narcan now. The borders have to remain secure. The Border Patrol and the other agencies have to be able to focus on stopping everything being trafficked through the border, to include humans, but the most dangerous thing is the fentanyl. What was the other part of the question?
How have you seen this play out in your
tariffs? That's something on a federal level. Obviously, being from the North Country, we've got to cooperate with our neighbors to the north. We have to do things that allow our trade to continue in a positive manner. So, that's where I stand on that. We have to work with our Canadian partners.
Mr. Cashman?
As a state representative of a large border district, we need to advocate for what we're seeing here in the district and work with our federal partners. As town supervisor, we've built a relationship with Cornwall because that relationship is bigger than just being Montreal's U.S. suburbs. And we'll continue to have a relationship with those individuals. But we are also a tourism economy. Now, as far as fentanyl, I'm a firm believer that we need to continue to provide addiction and recovery services. We need to destigmatize it. No one should die because of this. But we also need to hold people accountable that are trafficking drugs in our community, whether it's coming through the border, whether it's coming up through New York City, or it's coming through Mexico. No matter where it's coming, people need to be held accountable.
Mr. Davison?
Well, unfortunately, under the Democratic one-party rule, there is no deterrent for trafficking drugs to the North Country. People are caught and released. I can tell you the change over the last 5 to 10 years. I worked as a BCI lieutenant. I work in the narcotics. There's no deterrent anymore. So saying that we need to do it is easy, but when there's no deterrent and there's no prison time for people, it's a lot harder to do than just say it. Thank you.
And Kara, did you have a follow-up about the
think,
New York-Canada Relations Task Force?
Yep, Mr. Cashman spoke to this, but former Assemblyman Billy Jones chaired the Assembly's New York-Canada Relations Task Force. In that role, he'd meet with and host, Canadian officials to promote the relationship between the state and Canada. If elected, is that a position you would seek to take up?
Yes, I would. I have strong relationships, obviously, with law enforcement partners on both the U.S. and Canadian side. I'm capable of working with our Canadian neighbors to the north, and that is a position that I would take up, yes.
And Mr. Cashman?
As I stated previous, I would hope to continue that good work. I think it's absolutely critical, not only for the economic part of it, but the social connective tissue that our two countries hold together.
Right, our next question from Alec, and Mr. Davison, you'll be answering first.
Utility rates last winter soared for many people living in the North Country. Some reported increases in hundreds of dollars in their monthly bill. The main utility company in ISEG says the higher costs were due to higher demand and consumption. They also say they can't control the cost of electricity because of the New York independent system operator supplies the cost to utility companies. What solutions do you have for increasing our supply and lowering costs in the North Country? And what policies or changes would you seek to enact if elected?
First of all, the electric mandates that are being put on the people in the North Country are not practical, they're not attainable. We don't have the grid to support it. If people can't choose and have alternate sources of heat, we're going to have people freezing to death, like what would happen during the ice storm. New York City and Albany and the cities are not the same as the North Country. It's a lot colder here. They need to have exceptions for our area, so we have a choice. We cannot use electric school buses. If you talk to the superintendents, the rural bus routes of the North Country cannot make a bus run in an electric school bus. We're going to end up with kids on the side of the road with no power and no heat, and we're going to have to get a diesel tow truck to come tow them off the road.
Mr. Cashman, 1 minute.
I agree with my opponent. There are failures with this, but what we need to do is to put guardrails on the Public Service Commission and NYSEG and our other power companies to put caps on how much they can charge individuals. I've talked with many seniors and other individuals around their kitchen table looking at their bills, and it's most concerning, right? And it's not just the electric rates, it's the transmission fees that they're charging too, are astronomical. The green economy is not going anywhere, but what we need is a mixed economy. Here in the North Country, people should be able to use their wood stove and their gas. We also have to recognize that there isn't a strong enough electrical infrastructure here. If New York City wants to have electric buses, let them have electric buses. But where routes are too long and we can't get kids safely from corner to corner in the district, there has to be a carve out for the North Country. And that's what I'll work on with my colleagues, is to educate them and have them understand that sometimes we need to do things just a little different.
Any additional points, Mr. Davison?
Yes. I agree with what he said about that. I think we need to work together, even with our across the aisle, to come up with solutions. The problem is the one-party rule has created this problem, and they're not about listening to it. They've been holding meetings on this, and they refuse to hold any in the North Country. I haven't heard any elected officials, other than on the Republican side, demanding that those come up here. I mean, maybe you just did one recently. It has to be done. The North Country is not the urban areas. The people are different, the environment's different, and we have to serve the people of the North Country first and not answer to the majority party down in Albany.
Mr. Cashman.
As I've stated a number of times, we need bipartisan support to move things forward. I put out a statement agreeing with Assemblyman Matt Simpson, of which we will share, Essex. NYSERDA should have been holding in-person district listening sessions as they're building out the 15-year energy plan. But for things to change, my opponent keeps talking about the majority Democrats. Well, the majority is still going to be there. The big difference is having somebody in the room trying to convince them versus somebody knocking on the door on the outside. I'll be in there with that caucus having those tough conversations.
All right. Mr.
Yeah,
Davison.
I mean, the Republican Party is fighting these mandates. I can say that, his Working Family Party is completely for, all green and right now. So he says he's going to fight against all this stuff. I don't know how that's possible. He's one person. We have to use a common sense approach to this, work across the aisle, and do what's best for the people in the North Country.
Did you have a follow, Alec?
I do. What would you say to advocates or opponents that would say clean energy is essential to the Adirondacks, to keeping it pristine and beautiful? And what worry would you have if there was a carve out for the North Country? I mean, could that leave us behind to being at the same rate of pace in terms of construction for electrification than the rest of the state?
Michael, go ahead first, and then we'll.
So I'm going to look at the minimum wage. A number of years ago, the minimum wage was going up in New York City at one rate and another rate in the North Country or upstate, okay? We need to look at things in a parallel way, okay? The green economy, again, is not going anywhere. What we need to do is to make sure that we are positioned to manage things like the electrical infrastructure, the grid. That's just one example, okay? If the buses can't get along the route, there's a safety issue. These are common sense things. And I do believe having been endorsed by the Sierra Club, that we can protect our environment, but also focus on the health and safety of individuals that are coming to visit the Adirondacks, that live here in the Adirondacks in the North Country. So I think you can do both, but you just have to really plan for it.
And Mr. Davison, 1 minute.
Yes, I agree that we should maintain, the cleanliness and our environment up here. We have the lake, we have the Adirondacks, but we have to do it in a way that's balanced and controlled and not put under a timetable. I think the lives and the safety of the people that are up here in the North Country outweigh trying to be the first state to go all green. It just doesn't make sense. It's not going to work up here. It's not going to work. We have to fight against these mandates. People can't afford their electric bills. I just spoke to a farmer yesterday. After 39 years, he had to sell his farm because his electric bill was $2,000 every 2 months, and that had more than doubled in the last few years. So that's just one example of how bad things can be.
All right, thank you. Now to some of the questions sent to us from our viewers and followers on social media. And back to prisons for a moment. Joey Johnson from Saranac says that his dad is a corrections officer, and every time the state talks about closing another prison, he says families like his worry about losing everything. What will you do to stop these prison closures, even if your own party and governor support them? And what would you do if elected to try to convince your colleagues in the Assembly to advance legislation to support a constitutional amendment to allow for the resale and reuse of closed prison facilities in the Adirondack Park, like Camp Gabriel's? Mr. Cashman, 1 minute.
Yeah, I'm going to be absolutely unabashed in advocating for our COs and our community. They shouldn't close. We should be having a safe beds program that makes sure that we protect the COs and can manage these facilities. We also need to make sure that we are making it safe enough that we can get the National Guard out and providing more opportunities and incentives for the COs, because it was never about money, folks. It was about health and safety. And we also have other facilities that are languishing under the state control when we have need for housing and mental health crisis support. So I will be absolutely unabashed in pushing back at the governor and my colleagues and anyone else, advocacy groups alike, because we know here in the North Country that they are good paying jobs, they are doing honest work, and they are some of the hardest working individuals that we have here in the North Country.
Mr. Davison, 1 minute.
Well, I hate to beat a dead horse, but my opponent is going to have to once again fight against his Working Families Party, because they're all for closing prisons. They're all for defunding the police. We've got to support our law enforcement people, and right now the ones being treated the worst are the correction officers. They go to work daily not knowing whether or not they're going to make it home. They don't feel like they're being supported. The HALT Act needs to be repealed. It needs to be gone because it's doing nothing for anybody in there. I would not vote to close any prisons. We've closed enough. These prisons were built up here, and our economy depends on them. We just can't have any more closed. As far as using the facilities that we have closed already for other things, I'm 100% for that. Why have buildings just sitting there rotting?
Mr.
Yeah,
Cashman?
I've already talked about this a number of times of how I'll push back on my party and those that have endorsed me. There are things that I agree with. Protecting our seniors, making healthcare affordable, working on an agenda for childcare that could be universal. Those types of things. So while I may have a shared value system in one regard, there are things that I'm very different with. The fact of the matter, my toughest constituent will always be at the opposite end of my couch, my wife and I. And she and I don't agree 100% of the time. I don't expect my colleagues or my constituents and I to always agree, but I will do what's right for the district.
And Mr. Davison, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I'm not for closing any prisons. I'm for repealing the HALT Act immediately.
Thank you. Our second question is from Jeff in Schuyler Falls, who asks, does New York need more or less gun laws, and will more laws make the population safer? This goes to Mr. Davison first for 1 minute.
We don't need additional gun laws. As someone from law enforcement, I can tell you that. Maybe we should enforce the ones that we have. As somebody coming out of the law enforcement, I see cases get pled down to nothing. You can look across the country, and the places that have the toughest gun laws have the most gun crime. So it does not work to keep passing more strict gun laws. That just puts restrictions on law-abiding citizens. I'm a Second Amendment person. I think you have the right to bear arms. I don't think that law-abiding citizens should be, affected by that. I think we need to enforce the laws that are already on the books.
Mr. Cashman, 1 minute.
I'm pro-Second Amendment, and I'm also pro-education. I don't know of any law-abiding gun owner that doesn't want to do right by making sure that the gun is lock safe, that they've taken classes, etc. So yeah, we are in an area that people are very proud hunters. They want to have guns for safety and a variety of other things. Pro-Second Amendment.
And let's continue now with our panel in round 3 of our questions. Pat, you're up.
Thank you, Tom. The region is in a drought that many attribute to climate change. As we record this debate, Lake Champlain is at an historic low, with the current level at 92.9 feet. The record low level was 92.4 feet in 1908. Is the state taking appropriate measures to deal with the impacts of climate change? Or is the state moving too fast or too far on climate change initiatives, including any energy mandates?
Mr. Cashman, 1 minute.
environmental work needs to be done not in a silo. New York State cannot fix all the woes of the world, but I don't know a single person that doesn't believe and love the beauty and the majesty of the Adirondack Park, for example, right? Or Lake Champlain. So we need to have aggressive goals, but we also need to have common sense to get there. The electric grid is a prime example of us not being able to meet the standards that the state is putting forward. But we also have to work with our federal partners. And it's also a global issue, right? It's like taking a balloon and pushing on this side, it just expands over here. It's the same issue. So I'm a firm believer of working in parallel motions, but things that we can do is things like salt reduction on our roads so that we're not adding salt to Lake Champlain. We're protecting wellheads for various communities. So there are common sense things that we can do that do not put a burden on the taxpayers and residents of our community.
All right, thank you, Mr. Davison. 1 minute.
I do believe that we have to focus on, protecting our environment. We just need to do so in a controlled manner so as to not, we can't have it where it's not affordable to live up here. I've been knocking on doors now for weeks, and people, it's the same story over and over. They can't afford to live here. So they can't afford their taxes, they can't afford their electric bills. So we have to find some kind of balance. I agree with the SALT initiative. I was skeptical of it at first as a member of the state police because we're the ones that we're gonna have to deal with the accidents, but I gotta say, after a few years, it was effective. So I am open to changes like that as long as it doesn't harm the people in the North Country. They've got to be common sense changes, and they have to be realistic and practical.
Kara, next question from you then. Thank you, gentlemen.
A recent poll found that more than half of New Yorkers want Governor Kathy Hochul to sign a bill that would legalize physician-assisted death for those with 6 months or less to live. It's also known as medical aid in dying. If it becomes law, it would allow doctors to prescribe drugs to end a terminally ill patient's life if the patient requests them. Supporters say it would provide compassion and allow people to have control over their final days. Opponents, including religious groups and disability rights activists, say the measure could be used to coerce people into ending their lives. Governor Kathy Hochul has said she's seriously considering the bill. If the governor does not sign the bill and it comes up for a vote in the Assembly again next year, would you vote for or against legalizing medical aid in dying, and why or why not?
And Mr. Davison, we start with you. 1 minute.
I would not be in favor of that. That's a slippery slope. Once we start assisting people in dying, we end up having insurance companies deciding whether or not you're costing too much money, and they're encouraging you to go through the assisted suicide. As somebody that's a deacon, I would be completely against that bill.
And Mr. Cashman, 1 minute.
I absolutely would vote in affirmative of that. In fact, Janet Dupree and I have been down to Albany advocating for that very law, going door to door. I had a stepfather that was dying of brain cancer, and him not having the option of his choice is just horrifying. Now, it's not to say that he would have taken that option, but people should have that option. We afford more decency to our dogs and our cats and our pets than we do as humans. If we're going to be a pro-choice state, that has to be a choice for the individual. There certainly have to be guardrails in it, which I believe in, but 77% thereabouts New Yorkers in New York State agree with that. When does anybody agree at a rate that high? So I certainly would vote in the affirmative.
Any additional thoughts, Mr. Davison?
No, I think if you have suffering, they have medication to help relieve that suffering. I don't think assisting someone in dying is appropriate. There's countries in Europe who find out, they test for pregnancies, and when they find out there's a child with Down syndrome, they terminate the pregnancy. I'm not for that stuff. I'm not for this assisted suicide bill at all.
Final thoughts, Mr. Cashman?
And to be clear, this is for individuals that are terminally ill. So again, unflinching, I would support it. I've been on the record, I've been down in Albany advocating both Democrats and Republicans alike to pass this bill, and I hope that the governor will sign it.
Gentlemen, thank you. Next question from Alec Lachum.
In April, a housing report was released by Clinton County's Industrial Development Agency. It said to meet the area's needs, more than 1,000 housing units are needed. Meanwhile, South and Essex County local officials cite a lack of affordable housing for its workforce. The state's Department of Taxation also states that median sales price has jumped by more than $50,000 since 2020, now just over $331,000 statewide. If elected, what policies would you look to work on to increase our area's housing availability and affordability?
And Mr. Cashman, we begin with you. 1 minute.
Sure. I'm very proud that I and my team actually hosted a 6-county North Country Housing Symposium that had 120 individuals from builders to realtors, housing advocates. This is something that we've done a lot of work in the town of Plattsburgh. We passed the CHAMPS Law, which is an acceleration program that I would like to advocate other communities consider doing. But we also need to take programs where we take the burden away from the builders. We have to wipe away the sales tax so that we can build more homes. We also have to build up a stronger workforce. I believe in the trades and BOCES, we should be finding opportunities where that they can get into that market. There are a number of individuals that are builders themselves that are looking to retire, and they don't have the opportunity to pass their business on to the next generation. So there are a lot of things that we can triangulate with that. So from workforce housing to affordable housing to market rate housing, we need it all.
All right, thank you, Mr. Davison. 1 minute.
The problem is in New York State, we're spending money that we don't have on things that we don't need. Stuff like this is something that would be worth spending money on. I think we need to work on having affordable housing for everybody, and that includes the middle class too. The middle class seems to get left out of this picture. Being one of the highest taxed states in the country, now having these energy mandates, none of that stuff that's coming from the one-party rule is going to help out anything with the housing that you're talking about.
Final thoughts, Mr. Cashman?
And in addition to that, one of the things that New York State has to do is invest in infrastructure in our local municipalities, our water, our wastewater. These homes tend to go where there is strong infrastructure, and many of these systems are aging. One of the things that I look forward to doing as a member of the majority in the Assembly is making sure to bring the resources back home to the municipalities for their wastewater treatment programs, their water systems, their roads and bridges, etc.
Mr. Davison?
Nothing to add.
Oh, good. Okay, Alec, you had a follow.
Yes, we've talked a lot about mandates here today. I'm curious both of your thoughts on the short-term rental registry created by the state, or even short-term rental bans that exist in some areas.
Mr. Cashman, why don't we begin with you?
I believe that those should fall under home rule. The local municipalities know what their needs are the best, and I am certainly having conversations with many municipalities on how they're trying to manage that. I do not think that New York State addresses it well right now.
Mr. Davison.
I agree. I think less government involvement, the better. It's the same with the electric mandates. Everything should be governed more on a local level. So it applies to the local area because we're different than the other places. So New York State needs to stop placing these mandates on people and let the local officials decide whether or not they have these.
Thank you, gentlemen. Now another question sent in to us from Michael Gagno in Moores. We talked a little bit about migrant farm workers, but he asked a broader question, saying that dairy farms are such an important part of our community. Rising costs, climate change, limited access to land, and lack of workers are all threatening the few family farms that are left. What do you plan to do to assist struggling farmers in the North Country? And let's begin with Mr. Davison. 1 minute.
Well, like I said earlier, I have no problems with, and as my opponent said, a program where we have people coming here that are migrants temporarily to work on these farms. But I'm against just open border illegal immigration. We need to take care of our farmers. They're obviously the backbone of our country. Without them, we don't have any food. We don't have any nourishment. So I'm not against allowing migrant workers on the farms. I think once again, I bring up the example of the farmer that was put out of business because of the electric costs. We've got to bring the cost of everything in New York State down. These farmers can't afford to stay in business. All the family farms are going away, and you're left with these huge farms who honestly are no longer interested in selling milk. It's all about the energy from the waste from the animals.
Thank you. Mr. Cashman, 1 minute.
Again, we're agreeing on a lot of different things, which is wonderful. No farms, no food. We need to make sure that we do everything that we can for our farmers. And one of the things that's occurring right now is the next generation of farmers are making very difficult decisions whether or not they're going to stay on that farmland. So we need to reduce energy costs. We need to make sure that we are an advocate through the lens of the state with our federal partners, because these policies are really federally driven, but we're closest to the people. And we need to continue to advocate for sound policies that are going to allow for these individuals to do an honest day's work with the resources that they need, and that's people. The tourism economy is also equally hit with these types of impacts. So whether it be farms, be it our hotels, our restaurants, you have my commitment to look for common sense solutions that allow us to support people generation to generation, particularly our farmers.
All right, anything else to add, gentlemen?
Yeah, I mean, what's closing these farms down is the high taxes and the high energy rates. Those are being created by the one-party rule in Albany. So someone's got to stand up to that one-party rule, and we have to start balancing things out. We have to start looking after the people in the North Country.
All right, we have time for one more question. So Pat, do you have another question?
Yes, I do have one more question.
We'll go to Mr. Cashman first with this one.
Okay. In the North Country, including the 115th District, the Plattsburgh, Ogdensburg, Messina, Watertown, and Adirondack regional airports rely on a federal subsidy program called the Essential Air Service, which according to the federal website says guarantees smaller commercial airports receive a minimum level of scheduled air service. Now, there was a risk that that subsidy was going to be eliminated, would expire last Sunday, but it does remain in place. That expiration did not occur. So if these subsidies come under a risk of ending again, is there any way the state can fill the void or create a permanent funding source to assure that air carriers can contract with these rural airports to provide passenger service?
Mr. Cashman, 1 minute.
I think it's critical to understand that there are federal issues, state issues, and local issues. Many of the issues of the federal government continue to compound on the states and then from the state down into the localities. At this time, I don't know of a true forward-looking solution, but I think it remains a commitment of all of us to look at it with wide eyes, see what is occurring, to try to come up with common sense solutions if there is a solution, but we cannot simply fill in the gap of every federal failure.
Thank you. Mr. Davison, 1 minute.
Yeah, once again, we've got to stop spending money on stuff that we don't need to spend, so we have money to help support programs like this. I'm 100%, obviously we want to support flights locally. We want to take care of our people. We don't want them to have to travel an hour to get on an airplane. So I'm for legislation to keep these flights going. Our problem is we're spending money on stuff that we don't need. We've got to slow that down and spend money on stuff that makes common sense, stuff that actually benefits law-abiding, tax-paying citizens.
Gentlemen, we're ready for closing statements. We're going to move on now. You each have 1 minute, 30 seconds for that. And Mr. Cashman, again, we coin toss, and you will go first.
Again, thank you. Again, my name is Michael Cashman, and I'm running to serve you as your assemblyman for the 115th Assembly District, Clinton, Franklin, and parts of Essex. Again, I want to remind you that I grew up in a working class family and came to Plattsburgh here 26 years ago. As I stated earlier, my toughest constituent is always going to be at the opposite end of my couch, and that's my wife. But the same commitment that I made to her is going to be the same commitment that I make to you as my constituents. I'm going to speak to you and listen to you with dignity and respect, because we need bipartisan solutions. That's why I am very humbled to have received the endorsement of the last two occupants in that seat, Assemblyman Jones and Assemblywoman Janet Dupree. They know that we have to punch above our weight down in Albany. They know that rural America doesn't always get its fair share. And while I recognize that we may not always get what we deserve, your voice will be heard in the chambers. I will continue to advocate for our COs, our seniors, to make sure that we're focused on good infrastructure, making sure that we are focused on rural health care and everything in between. I encourage individuals to go to www.cashmanforassembly.com to learn more about my platform, because right from the beginning, this has been about solutions. It's been about listening to you, learning from you, so that I can lead on your behalf. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Cashman. Mr. Davison.
Once again, I'm Brent Davison. I'm looking forward to your vote on November 4th. I want to bring a common sense approach to Albany. I want to serve the people of the North Country, of the 115th District. I want to be a check on the governor and her very radical, the laws that are coming out of New York City and Albany. The parties that I'm running under are against the stuff that's going on. A lot of the problems that we've discussed here today are a result of the one-party rule. So, you know, if Mr. Cashman were to be elected, I wish him luck in fighting his own party. His predecessor did not do that, and he never ran under the Working Family Party. Where I lack in political experience, I make up for in service and leadership and integrity. I'm not taking this job for my own personal gain. I'm taking it to fight for and represent the people of the North Country. I promise you that I would do that with everything that I have. My beliefs will not change. They don't change right before an election. They're my beliefs from my heart, so my target doesn't move. The voters in the North Country are not naive. They know who they need to send down to Albany to make a change. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davison. Just a reminder, you can watch this State Assembly debate again Saturday at 7 and Sunday morning at 10 here on Mountain Lake PBS and on our website at mountainlake.org. We also want to remind our viewers that Election Day this year will be Tuesday, November 4th. Early voting begins next week on Saturday, October 25th and runs through Sunday, November 2nd. Here in Clinton County, the polls at the County Government Center will be open 9 to 5 every day and open 2 nights during the week. Check with your local County Board of Elections office for polling locations and hours. Candidates, thank you for participating tonight. Also, my thanks to Pat Bradley, Kara Chapman, and Alec Rasham for asking the questions, to the League of Women Voters of the North Country, Susie Johnson and Barb Ebert, for volunteering to be our timers for this evening, and to those of you watching at home and online, our thanks as well. Please do your part and vote on Tuesday, November 4th. I'm Thom Hallock for all of us here at Mountain Lake PBS. Thanks for watching and have a good night.